Hello everyone, my name is Dmytro Mazin and I represent the English Language Department, Faculty of Humanities at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Today I would like to talk about some aspects of the thematic and linguistic correlation in the graduate students' essay writing, which was organized as part of the EuroMaidan Research Forum project among the master program students at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. This introductory study was generally done using discourse analysis approaches as highlighted in particular in the book by Jorgensen and Phillips, Discourse Analysis as Theory and Method 2002, as well as in the Handbook of Discourse Analysis 2001 edited by Deborah Schifrin, Tannen and Hamilton. Also applying elements of structural linguistic analysis. Before I start, I would like to express my genuine gratitude to the authors whose essays offer such sincere, rich and meaningful material for thought, and this brief presentation is a modest acknowledgement of their efforts. We could start our brief analysis with recalling one of the views of the discourse theory authored by Ernesto Leclerc and Mouffe, according to which discourse has a powerful influence on shaping the social world and its meaning, and that this meaning is not stable. It is implied that different discourses are constantly interacting or even fighting with each other. Different discourses, I'm quoting, each of them represented particular ways of talking about and understanding the social world, say Jorgensen and Phillips, are engaged in a constant struggle with one another to achieve hegemony, that is, to fix the meanings of language in their own way. Mostly from this perspective, we'll be looking at the revelation of different discourses and how various perspectives are advocated or deconstructed in the students' written texts about EuroMaidan. Our approach will be applied in correlation to some of the general themes identified in the analyzed written text, such as representation of the old previous authorities and government, Ukrainian society before, during and partially after the EuroMaidan, Orange Revolution of 2004 and EuroMaidan of 2014, EuroMaidan goals, nature and first results, protesters, EuroMaidan participants and anti-Maidan participants, new government and EuroMaidan leadership, EuroMaidan and international attitudes. First of all, talking about the EuroMaidan goals, nature and results in the analyzed writing, one can observe a common tendency which can be identified as the conscious desire to avoid or deconstruct the misconceptions or myths about EuroMaidan in the public opinion shaped by political and media discourses, including social media. For example, social media have put a lot of labels on it, many of which are far from reality. Yet, what is evident is that other generalizations may appear, in particular about the effects of EuroMaidan. For example, the change has touched every mind of every person in Ukraine and far away its borders, which is linguistically represented by less distinct or indistinct lexical characteristics. For example, it is crucial to realize that the major achievement of the revolution is not only overthrow of the political regime. In fact, we gained more, much more. The authors often show the tendency to rely upon fact, objective reasoning, which is generally observed, but more emotional, expressive and informal lexical elements appear or literally break through in their writing too. Also, EuroMaidan is often seen as a multi-stage process, the stages of which represent quality modifications, an evolvement from factual description up to metaphorical and even mythological level. For example, first, a place where people gather, then unique identity, then fire and ashes, and finally, after the passage through sufferings and death, it is a sacred place of mourning. Likewise, talking about the theme of Ukrainian society before and during the EuroMaidan, the society is seen as becoming mature, fully independent and strong. In one case, this is directly referred to what can be called as social Darwinism. Every person comes through different stages of the development during his or her life. The same happens in Ukraine. Altogether, the linguistic elements in this theme stress the inevitability of the revolutionary changes in Ukrainian society. When talking about the Euromaidan victims and tragic consequences, emotionally colored vocabulary and syntax structures are used, such as staggering, it is hard to believe it has happened in peaceful Ukraine, and such emotional elements very often render the sense of amazement or staggering among the authors themselves. In terms of discursive psychology, the dominant feelings of surprise, amazement, or the absurd come out of the clash of the two types of discourses based upon their temporal characteristics. If we turn to the theme of the representation of the old previous Ukrainian authorities and government, there are different linguistic elements to express the attitudes, including even neutral ones, but emotionally charged units are prevailing. At the syntax level, there is a frequent chaining of lexical units of similar semantic field and emotive connotations. Quite often the list or chain of sentence elements develops from more neutral to increasingly emotional stylistic elements. For example, people were fed up with corruption. Oligarchs dominated politics and businesses, dodgy elections and Yanukovych regime. As in the mentioned example, metonymy is often used in essays to expressively represent the evaluation of the previous political government, Yanukovych regime. Touching upon the theme of newly shaped Ukrainian government and Euromaidan leadership, it is worth noting that there is a focus on no direct opposition between the Ukrainian government before and the Ukrainian government being born during the Euromaidan events. In fact, there is a shaped opinion that the people themselves or the community has changed the power and not the politicians. Generally, the authority of the government is substituted with a genuine civil leadership, and politicians are seriously questioned, which can be generalized in the following repeated sub-themes. Politicians of all types are not fully reliable. They want all the power. Consequently, new authorities being shaped are under suspicion too, and Euromaidan is the revolution of people, not politicians, unlike to some extent the existing opinions about 2004 Orange Revolution. Instead, there are dominant views of the need for new leadership. There are domineering appeals to leadership values, not an authority or political power. For example, the words of Martin Luther King are applied as words from a spiritual leader, not a politician. Similarly, the images of Taras Shevchenko and Ukrainian Cossacks are activated. There are explicit warnings to the new authorities who have just come or will come into power. Euromaidan will be forever carrying a vital message for the Ukrainian politicians. People will not ignore government abusing its power. And there is a realistic view of the ongoing processes after the revolution peak. Now we are losing in the media war. The lies on television provokes separatism in our country. Comparing the Euromaidan in 2014 and Orange Revolution in 2004, there is a prevailing feeling of an unexpected and amazing turn at 2014 Euromaidan. In this thematic group, as well as the others, often the revelation of discourses in the essay writing starts with a neutral, formal position of the subject. For example, historical and/or political definitions of Euromaidan, then develops into an emotionally colored style, protesters' discourse, and ends up with neutral formal language again. For example, from Euromaidan as manifestation of people's distrust and unsatisfaction with the Ukrainian government, or a huge wave of protests in November 2014, to Euromaidan as a cry of the Ukrainian soul for development, of better life, or a little place of hope, and finally Euromaidan as an integral part of Ukrainian and world history. Generally, as a result of such inter-discourse struggle, the older one, namely a previous vision of Ukrainian community and social responsibility, is discarded and replaced with a new one. For instance, before the events, the Ukrainians were still mentally close to the Soviet culture, with its severe government control, low level of freedom, and citizens' disinterest. And the new discourse shows that Ukrainians are eager to live in the free democratic environment, and will not stay calm when facing their rights being restricted. They demonstrate unbelievable courage and great unity. It is also characteristic that the new views upon the Euromaidan can also be differentiated into neutral, formal and personal community levels. The following example demonstrates that, narrowly speaking, Euromaidan has succeeded in overthrowing the current president and his political regime. However, broadly speaking, the events occurred prove that Ukrainian people will not tolerate any government that operates opaquely and make decisions contrary to citizens' interests. An important feature of such person-community-based discourse is that the lexical units are less specific in their meaning. Words and phrases here can be easily substituted with synonymic words and phrases. They are built around certain key words. In the mentioned example, that is the key phrase, will not tolerate any government that. And the rest of that phrase is not fixed in terms of vocabulary. On the other hand, the formal historical discourse usually operates with more fixed terms and phrases. In particular, when talking about the formal reasons for the Euromaidan start. In conclusion, I would like to say that the interrelation of the thematic and linguistic attitudes in the opinion writing about Euromaidan is worthwhile, as it can offer significant insights into the process of the actual building or struggle between different discourses as they are reflected through language. Thank you for attention.